There was a time when intelligence felt dangerous in hip-hop. Not weak, not boring, dangerous. He was proof of that. While others raised their voices to be heard, he lowered his. While chaos sold records, he chose control. His words came carefully, like someone who understood consequences long before fame arrived. He did not sound rushed. He did not sound reckless. He sounded like a man who had already thought 10 steps ahead. That is why people listened. In the 1990s, his music became the soundtrack for listeners who wanted more than noise. It spoke to those who believed hip-hop could grow up without selling its soul. It carried the weight of jazz, discipline, and lived experience without glorifying destruction. But intelligence does not always protect you. Behind the albums, the tours, and the respect, something quieter was happening. Trust began to shift. Control changed hands. The circle around him grew smaller. Friends faded. Family felt distant. And one voice began speaking for him when he no longer could. By the time the world realized something was wrong, it was already too late. His final chapter was not written in studios or on stages, but in hospital rooms, legal documents, and unanswered phone calls. This is not just the story of a legendary rapper. It is the story of what happens when a thoughtful man loses control of his own narrative. Before the microphones, before the stages, his life was already shaped by expectation. He grew up in Roxbury, Boston, in a household that stood apart from the chaos many around him faced. His father was not just respected. He was historic. One of the first black judges in Massachusetts, a symbol of progress in a city that did not give that title easily. His mother worked quietly in the public school system as a librarian, surrounded by books, order, and discipline. This was a home built on structure. Education was assumed. Stability was expected. The future looked clear from the outside. But clarity can feel like confinement. As a child, his body slowed him down. Severe asthma forced him indoors when others ran free. While kids chased noise and movement, he learned patience. Listening, observing. Jazz filled that space. The smooth complexity of it spoke to him in ways chaos never could. By his teenage years, the conflict had begun. Outside his front door was a different form of respect. A louder one. A harsher one. The streets rewarded fearlessness, not restraint. And like many young men surrounded by contradiction, he wanted to understand both worlds. That curiosity led him to his closest friend, Big Shug. Shug carried street credibility effortlessly. Their friendship confused people. One story said everything. When Shug first visited his house, armed security stopped him at gunpoint. Only when his father stepped in did the tension ease. Two worlds, standing face to face, neither fully understanding the other. He asked questions that worried his parents. Why become a judge when everyone in the neighborhood hated judges? Why choose authority over acceptance? Eventually, the pull of education won. He enrolled at Morehouse College in Atlanta, one of the most respected historically black colleges in the country. It was there that his discipline sharpened. He studied business administration, preparing for a professional life. Rap was not yet part of the plan. At first, music meant singing. Hip-hop was something he admired, not something he embodied. That changed slowly. Big Shug began writing rhymes, teaching him cadence, timing, and control. Shug was a poet before he was a rapper, and those lessons stuck. By his senior year, something clicked. He was not trying to imitate street rappers. He was shaping something else. A voice that reflected both where he came from and what he had seen. After graduating, and even taking graduate-level courses later in New York, he stood at a crossroads. Corporate jobs were waiting. Stability was guaranteed. But hip-hop offered something else. A chance to speak freely. To merge intellect with rhythm. To prove that being educated did not mean being disconnected. His family did not understand the choice. They worried he was walking away from everything they had built. But his decision was already made. He was not running from his upbringing. He was trying to expand it. When his voice finally found its place, it did not arrive loudly. It arrived with patience. New York in the late 1980s was aggressive by nature. Rappers competed for attention with volume, bravado, and urgency. The city rewarded whoever could dominate the room. But he chose a different approach. He let silence work for him. He trusted timing. He believed control was more powerful than chaos. That belief came to life when he connected with DJ Premier. Their partnership was not built on image. It was built on discipline. Premier's beats were sharp, rooted in jazz, stripped of excess. His voice fit perfectly into the spaces between the drums. Together, they created a sound that felt grounded, unhurried, and unmistakably serious. That sound became Gang Starr. When they released No More Mr. Nice Guy in 1989, the album did not chase trends. It introduced a mindset. He rapped as if every word mattered, as if listeners were expected to keep up. Songs like Manifest did more than entertain. They challenged the audience to think. The industry noticed something was different. That difference caught the attention of filmmaker Spike Lee, who heard discipline where others heard restraint. The collaboration on Mo Better Blues was not accidental. Jazz Thing bridged two worlds that had always been connected but rarely respected equally. Hip-hop was no longer borrowing from jazz. It was standing beside it. With each release, their influence deepened. Step in the Arena felt sharper, more confident. Daily Operation expanded their reach without compromising their identity. They were not chasing radio hits. They were setting a standard. In a city known for dominance, they led by consistency. By the early 1990s, many listeners believed they were from Brooklyn. The sound felt inseparable from New York. The irony was never lost on those who knew their roots. Neither man was born there, yet few represented the city more accurately. Then came Jazzmatazz. This was not a side project. It was a statement. Instead of sampling jazz legends, he brought them into the studio. Real instruments, real musicians, real collaboration. For some, it was risky. For him, it was inevitable. The project expanded hip-hop's vocabulary and resonated deeply overseas, where audiences embraced its maturity. While American hip-hop debated authenticity, Europe listened. By the mid-1990s, his influence extended beyond charts. Younger artists studied his cadence. Veterans respected his restraint. He had proven that hip-hop could age gracefully without losing relevance. At his peak, he did not dominate conversations. He shaped them. But power built quietly can also fracture quietly. And beneath the surface of respect and success, pressures were already forming that would test everything he had built. Power does not always announce its departure. Sometimes, it fades quietly. By the late 1990s, the success was undeniable. The respect was earned. Yet behind the scenes, the foundation was no longer stable. Money moved through too many hands. Lawsuits followed success. Sample clearances turned creativity into liability. Trust, once assumed, now required explanation. He felt it. What had started as artistic freedom slowly became negotiation. Who owned what? Who controlled decisions? Who answered to whom? These questions were never shouted, but they weighed heavily on every move forward. At the same time, alcohol tightened its grip. Friends later said he had always enjoyed drinking, but this was different. Stress turned into routine. Routine turned into dependency. The calm voice listeners heard on records masked a man trying to manage pressure without asking for help. The legal troubles only added fuel. An arrest at LaGuardia Airport over a firearm forced him to confront how fragile his position had become. He avoided prison, but the message was clear. Another case followed, rooted in a personal dispute that spiraled into public consequence. Each incident chipped away at the image of control he had carefully built. Inside the studio, distance grew. The partnership that once felt effortless now required patience neither side fully had. Communication slowed. Frustration replaced trust. During one album's creation, the break nearly became permanent. Though they reunited to complete the project, the connection never fully healed. Ironically, this turmoil produced Brilliance. Moment of Truth arrived in 1998 like a mirror. The lyrics were introspective, grounded, honest. It became their most successful release, reaching #1 and earning gold certification. Many fans still consider it the definitive statement of his career. But success could not repair what had already fractured. Afterward, the separation became real. Years passed without collaboration. Each side offered different explanations. Addiction, money, power, control. No single reason told the full story. It was accumulation, quiet resentment layered over time. Outside music, danger followed him. A robbery at gunpoint outside a Queen's studio shook any remaining sense of safety. Rumors of setups circulated. Trust narrowed to a small circle. Still, he continued working. Jazzmatazz expanded. International tours filled venues overseas. In Europe, he was celebrated as a cultural figure, embraced for his intellect and restraint. The applause was loud, but the circle around him grew smaller. Something had changed in how he moved through the world. He spoke less to old friends. He leaned more on new voices. Decisions that once felt collective now felt centralized. Control, once shared, began shifting. And in that shift, a new presence entered his life. A figure who would soon hold influence not just over business, but over access, communication, and ultimately, the final chapter of his story. In America, the story did not unfold cleanly. It arrived in fragments. Rumors, online posts, conflicting updates that never seemed to align. For an artist known for clarity and restraint, the lack of transparency felt unsettling. Fans noticed who was missing. Close collaborators were silent. Family members were nowhere to be seen. Information came almost entirely from one source, and that alone raised concern. In hip-hop, silence often speaks louder than statements. As news of his illness spread, questions followed quickly. Why was access so limited? Why were updates inconsistent? Why did it feel like the man who spent his career controlling his narrative no longer had control over it? When word of his death surfaced in April 2010, the shock was immediate. Many in the United States learned about it online, the same way casual fans did. There was no unified family statement, no clear timeline, just disbelief. Then came the letter. A message said to be written shortly before his death appeared, praising one individual and severing ties with another. To many American fans, it felt wrong. The tone did not match the voice they had known for decades. The timing raised doubts. How could such a detailed statement exist if he had been hospitalized, sedated, and reportedly in a coma? Media outlets hesitated. Hip-hop journalists tread carefully. Some repeated the claims. Others questioned them openly. Within the community, sides quietly formed. Friends spoke out. Family members rejected the letter entirely. The debate shifted from mourning to accountability. Across the ocean, the reaction felt different. In Europe, particularly in France and the United Kingdom, the focus remained on the music. Audiences there had long embraced his Jazzmatazz projects and his thoughtful approach to hip-hop. To them, he was less a subject of controversy and more a cultural bridge. Tributes filled venues. Fans spoke of albums that shaped their youth, of lyrics that aged with them. The noise surrounding his death mattered less than the work he left behind. This contrast revealed something deeper. In America, his final chapter was defined by unanswered questions. In the rest of the world, it was defined by respect. Two narratives existed at the same time, neither fully erasing the other. And somewhere between them stood the truth, still unresolved. When an artist can no longer speak for himself, something else begins to speak in his place. Documents, statements, interpretations. In his case, the silence felt unnatural. A man known for clarity left behind confusion. A voice built on truth became surrounded by competing versions of reality. And once the narrative fractured, it never fully came back together. Some remember him as a pioneer who proved hip-hop could mature without losing its soul. Others focus on the final years, where control shifted and access narrowed. Both truths exist, but neither tells the whole story alone. What cannot be disputed is the work. The music still stands, untouched by controversy. The calm delivery, the disciplined cadence, the refusal to rely on shock value. He taught listeners that intelligence did not weaken hip-hop. It strengthened it. That restraint could command attention just as powerfully as aggression. For older fans, his records feel like time capsules. They remind people who they were, what they believed, and how music once respected patience. For younger artists, his influence lives quietly in structure, in pacing, in the understanding that not every message needs to be shouted. The debates around his final chapter may never settle. Letters will be questioned. Motives will remain unclear. Legal battles may fade, but the doubt will linger. History does not always offer clean endings. But legacy does not depend on agreement. It depends on impact. Years later, his music continues to travel farther than the arguments ever will. It plays in places far removed from hospital rooms and court filings. In headphones, in cars, in quiet moments when people need something honest. His son now carries the name forward, not as a replacement, but as a continuation. Proof that a voice can outlive the circumstances that tried to silence it. In the end, the most important truth may be the simplest one. When the noise fades, what remains is the work. And the work still speaks. If his music meant something to you, if it helped you think, grow, or slow down in a world that rarely does, share that memory below. Stories like his survive because listeners keep them alive.